Welcome to the Report, where we watch and talk about every episode of the Colbert Report from 2005 to 2014. That's a lot of episodes. I'm Alex,
And I'm Nathaniel.
and Colbert's guest is Monica Crowley. So, the news, it talks about, the big events for or Special Prosecutor Patrick Fitzgerald giving a press conference, and George Bush picking Samuel Alito to be the Supreme Court nominee.
Mm-hmm.
And the caption is Scalito's Way, which I guess put on doing Carlito's Way, with starting Al Pacino, I guess.
Did that come out recently?
No, I think it was like in the 90s.
It was in the 90s? Okay.
Yeah. And
Another Catholic.
he wonders if Muslims watch the show in reference to the later segment,
Mm.
which I think is the Tour de Truth.
Yeah.
Right at the top, boo, because it's on Halloween.
It's on Halloween. Does he get scared by the boo?
I don't think so. And then he talks about the Sunday shows he watched, and the big legal news was actually Law and Order Criminal Intent. He goes to plot summary. I couldn't find it based on the plot summary. There wasn't an episode that aired exactly on October 30th, so
maybe not a real episode.
Yeah, maybe not. But he said it was vague on purpose so that you would watch the rebroadcast.
What's the rebroad? Okay.
Yeah. Like the press conference by Patrick Fitzgerald was announced that he served an indictment to Scooter Libby.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he served him to Karl Rove like some of the people were expecting, but yeah.
Is there any reason for that? Why Karl Rove
I'm not
wasn't
sure.
indicted?
And he decided to do the asynchronous interview thing again, where he uses the clips from the press conference to do an interview with him.
Which is funny.
Yeah. And he's asked, like, are you fine with me taking your clips out of context this way? And he says the short answer is no. And then he goes, well, the long answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, he brings up the fact that the White Sox won the World Series because Patrick Fitzgerald is indeed from Chicago.
Mm. Is he from south side Chicago? Or
I don't think so.
Fan?
Probably more likely a Cubs fan then. But and he does make a hit-by-pitch analogy in the thing, which is what he used for that. I looked up the full transcript, and he says that, like, I guess, like, baseball analogies are fashionable now, so I'll use one.
I think baseball analogies have always been fashionable.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a surprising amount of analogies that come from baseball.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that come from boxing, too, but
yeah.
So I guess, like, all the sports that were popular in, like, 1900 or whatever.
Yeah.
And, the analogy thing is, like, so, like, if, like, a pitcher just slugged the batter with the ball, you'd think there must have been something going on before.
Yeah.
And, like, the indictment's not about the war.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, Colbert asks him if he's watched Lost, which had come out in September 2004, and is he's frustrated by the plot twists. So
it's been about a year since Lost came out at this point.
And I guess it's already gotten the reputation, which it will never really shed. But
okay.
And then he says, ask me a question. He says, when did you stop beating your wife? Which it seems like in the transcript was like, said like that would be an example of a loaded question. So
yeah. Also, isn't Colbert doing the whole thing where he's like trying to give softball questions and then hit him with like hard questions?
Yeah, that would make sense.
That's the joke for the segment, is that he's giving two really easy questions and then a like insane question.
Yeah. And then he asked, like, how would you ask Grove for more testimony, and just reuses the clip of saying he would hit him in the head.
So, what was the actual like thoughts about the press conference? Was it?
I don't know. Was
it considered like kind of goofy?
I don't know. I think it was kind of normal, but I mean, he does make fun of Fitzgerald later, as we'll see, because the word is Alito. And it says like he had the courage to replace Sandra Day O'Connor with another white guy. And it says, at least it had like maybe we'll get the courage to have a Latino judge. It says maybe next time, and indeed the next Supreme Court would be of a Latina judge, but it would be by Obama, of course. So
yeah. Still, it's a bit of a funny coincidence.
Yeah, and he calls Sandra Day O'Connor Sandra Jelf. Yep. I probably like the Scalito thing is because they did call him Scalito because it's like sort of the portmanteau of Scalia because he was like the little Scalia.
Yeah.
I assume that would also be like the ship name for if anybody.
Yeah.
I feel like there must have been somebody that wrote that, but
somebody, yeah, sure. But
just to make fun of like how they voted in like the Supreme Court decision on gay marriage or whatever, like seems kind of off. And then he says like he's for like people having unrestricted access to machine guns. He's for saying that women that get abortion should have to tell their husband even if he has a machine gun. But then he says that Patrick Fitzgerald would have been a better justice. So I imagine if he says that, people must have thought that he would be too conservative as a prosecutor. But
Yeah.
and then Ed just has a whole bunch of people praising him and saying that he's in Dreamboat City, population him.
Alito?
No, Patrick
Oh, Patrick
Fitzgerald.
Fitzgerald.
Oh,
Okay.
that guy. And then he says like John Roberts is attractive too, and he says that knowing what's attractive is manly because men know what men like. This is not going to come. I'm guessing that's what like the bullet point said.
Yeah.
And then talks about the cases he's going to cover, and it was SD Warren versus the Maine EPA, which is a real case. One being a unanimous ruling that an outflow from a dam is covered by the Clean Water Act.
Hmm.
And he says like he'll use his job to stalk Karl Rove. And then it says, "I know what you did in the summer before last summer." I guess was the
Okay.
caption. Can imagine that's when the plane thing happened.
Yeah. What? So in like the fake issues Colbert brought up about like the machine gun and such, how does that actually align with Alito's rulings
I'm not
previously?
sure. I mean, it must have
Or
had like.
has anything talked about come up as a case in any way?
I
Like
mean,
the
since then, I mean, of course, he has ruled on a lot of gun cases, but
yeah.
that.
And who was the Chief Justice at this time?
I mean, it would have been Roberts because
Would
he
have
was
been
just
Roberts,
appointed to
just appointed
replace Rehnquist. But
triplet. Okay.
yeah, and then he says like, the saying is, you keep your friends close, keep your enemies and lifetime appointments closer. Then he
Yeah.
says, and then I think the caption says some Chinese guy said that. And then of course he wraps back around by saying like he can Patrick Fitzgerald, he can be the justice who saves your ass. This says Bush has a sweet ass.
Yep.
I'm not sure how many things Bush proposed himself got put before the Supreme Court, but yeah.
Yeah. Next segment, Monica Crowley
Monica Crowley's
interview.
interview. She had this show connected coast to coast on MSNBC, but it only lasted 9 months. So I guess that makes it kind of an artifact of when
Yeah.
she was on that. I think she would spend most of the rest of her career on Fox, but
Yeah.
yeah. And Colbert says she's like Ann Coulter or Laura Ingraham, but not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I guess. And I asked if she's related to Aleister Crowley because it's Halloween.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is there any relation? Like
I
possibly?
mean, maybe I haven't checked.
It's very
I mean, that is one
unlikely.
thing I actually could check because I've checked things like that before, but didn't do it
You
this
didn't
time.
do it?
Yeah, as if you put a goat skull in your hand, maybe I could see it.
Mm-hmm.
And then like Colbert asks, was George W. Bush painting an unventilated room when he nominated Harriet Miers? He says there is no greater fan of Bush than me, and
Who
that
said there was no greater friend of Bush than me?
I'm
Colbert or
pretty sure it's Colbert.
Colbert.
And then I think she says like that would be like nominating Angelina Jolie as the next one, and then he says that she'd have a better time. She could be like UN ambassador, like I guess because that would seem like she'd do like the actors and type things she would do.
Has Angelina Jolie been in any movies as a UN ambassador?
I'm not sure. I mean, I could. And then he said like he freed Brad. He said like
Hmm.
he had just gone out of with
Divorce.
Jennifer Aniston, and
Okay.
now they were. Yeah. She was a loose cannon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is any of this? What? How does Monica Crowley respond to any of this?
I don't know. I think she kind of just plays along, but
Yeah.
and then like Colbert says he has friends in Hollywood. It's the good Hollywood, the Tom Selleck Hollywood. And
Hmm.
honestly, hadn't thought of Tom Selleck as like the conservative celebrity, but I mean, I guess he was one of the big ones. They said he'd take over from Charlton Heston's position at the
Yeah.
NRA. So
Also at this time, probably
yeah,
different celebrities. Is Monica Crowley like the first like really conservative commentator guest he has on?
I have Lou Dobbs.
Lou
Remember,
Dobbs, but okay.
I mean, I think Lou Dobbs is probably more conservative.
More conservative Monica Crowley.
I mean, it's hard to say. Like, I mean, the definitions change all the time.
Yeah.
And he brings back, and because Crowley was a friend of Nixon. He of course brings back the thing about Nixon and about how Nixon would be like on the left now.
Mm-hmm.
Calls him Pinko, like
Yeah.
and and for like EPA and draft loan voting age, and Crowley also brings up the food stamps.
Yeah. But Crowley actually does agree with the assessment that
Yeah,
Nixon would be considered left wing now.
yeah. It says like, but I mean, should have had to like now we have to close the China box that he
Yeah.
was just calling it. Then he wonders like, why do liberals want to dislike him then? I
Mm-hmm.
guess in like a pseudo
Joke.
credulous way. Why did he ever leave office then? He was a coward.
Yeah.
I'd say for nowadays, probably he would be considered a coward for leaving office after that. But
Yeah.
and then he brings up the Bush greatest president question again.
I mean,
Then he said he could be the greatest of all time.
what does Crowley say? She's just say great.
I forget it. Yeah, I said it has been a while since we watched this. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she says great, but I do believe she says there's time for him to become the greatest president.
Yeah. Yeah, he could be the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Okay, and so now I have another freedom fact or fact about the Great Lakes. We accidentally watched this for the previous one,
For the
but
previous episode, but it doesn't really matter.
it doesn't really matter.
What's the fact about the Great Lakes?
It was like that, like America has 5 of the greatest lakes or something.
Oh, okay, that's a true
I mean,
fact.
Canada has like 4 of them.
4 Great Lakes.
I mean, like Michigan, I think is the one that's not in Canada at all. So
yeah, that's the greatest one. Anyway.
Yeah, and then we get the return of Stephen Settles the debate.
Yep.
For like the actually, I like any disparate holidays, which is Christmas, Kwanzaa, Easter, Passover, New Year. Like the disparate holidays that happen to fall together are Christmas and Kwanzaa, Easter and Passover, New Year's Eve, and New Year's Day. Which of course are all chosen because they're all holidays that purposefully
are not
are near each other.
Yeah.
And I always just find kind of like Kwanzaa's rise so fast as being one of the holidays people thought of as interesting.
Do people actually celebrate Kwanzaa?
I think they do sometimes, but and the thing is, like, the person did actually intend it to be like an alternative to Christmas, but I imagine most people celebrate both nowadays that do. But
and then the debate is Ramadan versus Halloween because they both happened on the same day.
Yeah, this was not the same day. Ramadan's a whole month. It was October 5th to November 3rd this time.
Well, I mean, Ramadan was being celebrated on the same day as Halloween.
And you do get Colbert saying, "I believe Islam is a great and true religion." To be clear, which just kind of funny because I feel like nowadays or like even just 10 years later, we'll feel kind of weird. But imagine that back then, I guess like people were still afraid enough of terrorism that they would or like I wouldn't be surprised if like because Bush did try to clarify that he didn't have any problems with all Muslims, that I wonder if that was like the excuse they gave, that like it was just to prevent the terrorists.
Yeah.
And so like he says like
caves are cooler than fields
because the idea was like the earliest Halloween celebrations by the Celts, although I mean it wasn't really Halloween, but we're in fields, and Muhammad had the Quran revealed to him in a cave. So,
as Colbert says, Batman
the Bat cave and not the Bat field.
Not the Bat field.
And it is funny because I mean when I first saw that out of context, I kind of thought of it as like Garfield dressed as Batman.
Oh, that's funny.
I'm sure that must have happened in something.
Yeah. Halloween is tied to the spiritual Great Pumpkin,
which makes it also a spiritual holiday.
Yep.
So that's why it's tied. And then he says that, but like Halloween has the better sound effect CD. So Colbert starts, and then he starts doing the sounds of Ramadan. Well, I would think the sounds of Ramadan would be like the prayer or something, but
yeah. Of course, the joke is that Colbert is actually doing the sounds himself anyway.
And it says Halloween closes the gap. And
with treats.
So Halloween wins. And then Halloween wins. Oh, I think the treats thing is like the thing that makes Halloween go over the top, because I mean in Ramadan you don't have to eat for half the day, so
that kind of Colbert loses interest at that point.
Yeah. And then the last segment is Rocktober, which I looked up doesn't seem to have been like a thing that any network had. I guess it was just like
he just made it up.
No, it not. He didn't make it up.
He didn't make it up.
There were it wasn't like, doesn't seem like there was like a TV network or like a magazine that had like an annual Rocktober tradition, but yeah.
Okay.
And then he says like the music with single syllable lyrics about boobs and elves, which I'm not sure about elves. And so then like he does like the Pulse thing again where he interviews people, but just about like what Rocktober means.
Yeah.
And then one of them says something my dad would be into. And the rock was, I guess. I mean, this was probably around the last years that I feel like you could say rock was one of the more popular mainstream genres, I guess. But.
Well, also keep in mind with Rocky has been doing like a rock intro for Monica Crowley the whole episode, which I think is important to keep in mind for the Rocktober. Probably part of why he's bringing it up.
I know later on, like when he has like a whole music themed week, he calls it Steve Fest Coachella Rock August Fest. So I assume Rocktober was always something that was funny to him.
Yeah.
And then like Colbert asks, "Do the Eagles count as rock?" and he says no, which feels
I feel most people would say the Eagles.
I mean, yeah, I feel like nowadays I don't think you'd find anybody saying the Eagles don't count as rock, but
I guess a big debate back then.
maybe I don't know. They said today's kids don't appreciate rock, which
Yeah.
It says those early pioneers would put in the blood, sweat, and tears of stealing music from black people. And then he brings up the band Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And then this is like they'll make the list of the greatest songs. Born to Be Wild will make number 40, and another one Bites the Dust will be in the 200s. I imagine that would probably be, I guess, the thing you'd consider a Rocktober tradition, but
yeah,
I'm not sure if they only put out those lists in October. I mean, they still update those lists all the time. So yeah, I guess because it would feel like it would get kind of outdated pretty fast.
Is Rocktober a big thing in the music magazines and such?
Maybe, I don't think so. I said I did look this up. This is the Bustle International Hedgerow, or Stairway to Heaven. It's like honoring the tradition of choking on your own vomit. And then he has a rock nativity scene. And then you also see the Colbert pumpkin at the end.
What's the Colbert pumpkin look like? Is it his face in a
I think so.
pumpkin?
Yeah. So I mean that was a bit less eventful because we didn't remember as much, but I mean that is the end of the first month, and we'll have a special episode about how the world took Colbert at this time.
After the first month, so after I guess the first Rocktober in many ways.
Yep.
And
signing off.